about yourself, and we'll dive into the interview.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm a freshman at Johns Hopkins University, majoring in biomedical engineering. My past work has largely been related to robotics and engineering research, and I'm now getting into cardiology biomedical research, hopefully in the realm of bioprinting.
Nancy. Okay. So what she did not say also is that she's done some incredible work empowering young people, which I'm excited to talk about more in this interview. Um, and so we will start with the first question, though, which is kind of addressing the elephant in the room that we are young people. You're a freshman in college, I'm a freshman in college. And so that does impact the way that we navigate the world. So my question for you is, when we're thinking about women leadership, how do you think your identity as not only a woman, but a young woman in STEM has played a role in some of your work, whether it's research or empowerment of other young people?
Absolutely. Our identities shape our experiences and therefore affect our perspectives and how we see the world. Being a young Latina woman, I'm able to see issues and injustices that affect the communities I'm a part of and work to address them. It really gives that extra layer of empathy and that new approach that you take that a lot of other people would not see based on their unique perspectives. I'm constantly putting myself in the shoes of the people I help. So, looking at if I were in their situations, would I actually benefit from the solution being offered? However, it can also make it harder to be heard. So, when I cold email organizations, for example, I tend to omit my age in the hopes of being taken more seriously, which is really sad, actually.
Yeah.
But it's always been interesting meeting people in person after working with them only virtually. I've had a few people comment that I'm shorter than I thought I would be, or that I look younger than I am, and those comments can be demeaning because they take away from the authority I've created in the virtual interactions.
Hmm. Yeah, I love your point about omitting the age. I do that too. Sometimes I wield it
Yeah.
as like a shock factor, like just to catch their attention, where it's like, I'm only 17, but, and then they'll be like, ooh, wait, what? Why is a 17-year-old emailing me? But then, on the other side, it is kind of like you worry, are they not going to even read the rest of my email? Because they're like, oh, she's 17, she can't possibly be worth my time or something like that. How do you think
Absolutely.
that has impacted your confidence in yourself, having to sort of hide a part of who you are when you're talking with other people?
I think it's been kind of a double-edged sword, almost like you said, because it's fun showing up somewhere and being like, "Hey, by the way, this is who I am. This is who you've been talking to this whole time," and kind of getting the other party to change the way they see something. Hopefully, engaging with me can make them more open-minded to engaging with other young women.
Hmm.
But it is more intimidating. It adds that extra layer of, "Oh, by the way, I'm a young woman. Or are you going to take me as seriously as you would take, for example, an older man?"
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I do, and on the other side though, I do think it's interesting that you pointed out the component of empathy because we both do
Yeah,
work in empowering other young people, and so the fact that we are young people ourselves gives us that ability to say, hey, I've been in your same situation. I know what you need. I know what you want. And so in the context of your work with SciFy or one of your other initiatives, how do you think that ability to identify with your your constituents of sorts has helped you with one of those, specifically?
of course. Looking specifically at sci-fi, I'd like to provide a little bit of background on it, just kind of explain what we're doing. It's an effort with the Sigma Xi or International Scientific Research Honor Society to create more opportunities for students looking to go into research who are perhaps interested in science, but whose schools don't have the funding or the opportunities laid out for them to pursue it. Looking at sci-fi and the work that we've done so far, it's been a lot of curriculum creation and setting the groundwork for going into those schools and engaging with the students directly. Looking at the curriculum, it's been interesting because I was reviewing it with the mindset of if I were a student, would I want to be looking at this? Would I be bored? Or is this too high level, too low level? What's the
Hmm.
situation there? And getting other students to look at it too kind of gave it that same perspective.
Hmm. And I bet that's helpful then because you looking at it, you understand what other students need, and so then when the students actually do engage with it, Have you seen that it's more effective than you otherwise would have expected?
Definitely. We've been reaching out to different science fairs around the country and having them look at it. I got a really interesting reply from one of the fair coordinators who took a look through it and told me that it was too high level for their students.
Okay.
So I immediately saw that, was a little bit taken aback, and I asked what specifically of the site was too high level. Eventually, we were able to talk and establish that it was just the way it was being presented, not the content itself. So that was a
Hmm.
really eye-opening experience looking at not only what we're sharing, but how we're showing it to those students. And that's where the ideas for creating YouTube videos and engaging more personably with the students came from.
Interesting. And I bet that takes an element of adaptability and improvisation, because when you especially when you're reaching out to other people, you might not expect that kind of response. So, um, how do you think getting that kind of response impacted kind of pushed you into having to be adaptable? How did that sort of feel? That let me I should probably clarify that. Like when we do have to improvise, it can be
Mhm.
uncomfortable sometimes, or it can be nerve-wracking. Can you
Yeah,
expand upon your feelings during that situation?
I think adaptability is at the end of the day really fun because it pushes you to think in different ways and come up with solutions to problems that you didn't even know existed.
Hmm.
Looking at that email specifically, it was a relatively small exchange because especially because it ended with, "Oh, the website's fine. We'll share it with our students." But it does open your eyes to the different possibilities of how people could react to it and encourage you to tap into that empathy even more and see how others could respond to the work that you're doing to see if they even would think it's worth their time or worth looking at, worth learning from.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Adaptability is fun. That should be on a shirt. I feel like we're people are often like afraid uncertainty and situations where you're not sure of the outcome. So embracing
Yeah.
it as exciting and opportunities to grow and learn rather than something to be afraid of or plan so much that you don't have to adapt, is
Mhm.
a really great mindset. And and so I'm glad to hear that it's worked out for you, definitely. Um, And so, going back to our topic of our main conversation, though, which is women in leadership, women self-advocacy, empowering ourselves and those around us. Um, one of the things that I think is really cool about you is that you've got so many initiatives that you've done that are all about helping young people equipping them with the knowledge that they need to succeed, whether it's at a science fair or applying for college. And so how do you think that knowledge plays a role in self-advocacy and lack of knowledge versus having the opportunities to acquire knowledge? Just I'd be curious your thoughts on the role of knowledge in advocacy, self-advocating for yourself.
That is such a cool question. I love it. I'm really big on education and empowerment, and those two do kind of go hand in hand because the more you learn and the more you know, the better you're equipped to go out and make yourself opportunities. That's something that
I
I've
like
kind of
that.
experienced going throughout high school, where a lot of the things I've done weren't something you particularly expect of a high schooler or expect of a high school experience. It's been a
Mhm.
lot of cold emailing and designing my own opportunities in regards to organizations like this SciFy thing. Now I want to pass that on to the next group of people to really show them that, hey, just because you don't see this published everywhere doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah, I like that. Create your own opportunities. I am a huge believer in that as well. I think that that's how my life has always been too. If something is saying, no, this isn't for you, um, I'm just like, okay, I'll just make it myself. Forget you.
Yeah.
Because you're right, there's so many opportunities or rather, there are so many chances to create your own destiny. You should let the small-mindedness of the world stop you. So, in terms of, can you give a specific example of maybe when you were faced with this lack of an opportunity and so you created it yourself?
Absolutely. Sci-fi is actually stemming from that. When I was in middle school, I was very fortunate to be able to go to a school that had a strong science research program. And then I switched to high school to an institution that didn't have that. So I got in there freshman year and I asked my friends when we were going to do science fair, and they responded by asking me what science fair was, which kind of hurt my soul a little
Whoa.
bit. It's really sad. So I went through and tried finding this research class that I took that wasn't even open to freshmen until I joined,
Hmm.
and um, started trying to compete in science fairs. I missed the deadlines for a few years because I didn't realize what they were, didn't see that they were there, and didn't have the school's guidance to help me with
Hmm.
that. Eventually, I formed a science research club so that other students did have those deadlines, did have that access that I lacked. And by my junior, senior year, we had other students doing science fair projects because of the club, which was a really amazing opportunity.
Um, yeah, I love that. And I think that really speaks to how we as women especially have to navigate the world because there are a lot of places where opportunities for us just haven't been created yet. And so we have to create them ourselves. Like, I mean, um, there's a reason why there are so many situations where, like, women are the first of something, like the first woman mathematician in NASA, or like the first woman to do this. It's because we are living in a society that was built without us in mind. And so there are naturally not going to be spaces that are built for us. So we have to create them ourselves. So in your situation, that high school, there was not a space devoted to science because it had not been thought of. And so somebody has to be the one to create everything in a way. And so you were the one who created that opportunity. And that takes guts. I mean, I'm sure that it was very nerve-wracking to try and create something like that without having the knowledge of, how do I create, how do I enter a science fair? How do I do things right?
Mhm.
I, especially as a type A person, I'd be like, what's the checklist? I need to know everything so I can do it perfectly. So in those situations, did you ever feel like afraid or overwhelmed? And if so, how did you cope with those feelings?
There's a very specific feeling of being overwhelmed in an environment where you're doing something for the first time, where it's
Hmm.
almost an invigorating type of overwhelm instead of an inundating one.
Hmm.
And I definitely felt that a lot with most of these initiatives that I've done. But kind of like you said, leaning into that type A and staying very organized has been crucial for this kind of thing. Between that and I've led teams of roughly 40 people, teenagers specifically, which is a whole other realm. But staying organized and establishing goals and deadlines and working towards those with your team is definitely super important for this type of initiative, especially having a team and knowing that you can count on other people to support you, have your back, and give their own ideas, bring up the problems with what you're thinking, and offer those different perspectives because we've all had different experiences in the past and we all know the different issues that we could run into.
I like that. Yeah, bringing other perspectives that can maybe elucidate sides of the problem that you didn't yet see. I really like that. Yeah, and to your point about again building a team, that is a huge part of being women. I feel like creating that network of support, people who can offer those different opinions and
Yeah.
and help you realize that yes, it is overwhelming, but it doesn't have to. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. I liked your part about goals, breaking something down, because we've been talking in one of my classes about proximal goals versus distal goals. And you've got these huge lofty ambitions, but how do you break them down into concrete steps that you can take in order to reach that higher goal? And so one of um the things that we were talking about is how that's so essential for not only um staying motivated and being like, when you have a to-do list, checking off that one item. It's like, oh yes, I did that, rather than being
Yep.
like, okay, I have to create this entire paper, and then you don't sort of break it down into the smaller steps of make an outline, find sources, etc. So not only that, it helps you stay motivated, but it also does make those goals less terrifying because you realize that it's
Yes.
really just a collection of those smaller steps. Um,
Mhm.
and that, I think that goes to your point about the importance of creating goals. So just out of the curiosity as an aside, what are some of your goals for SciFy?
Mhm. Right now, we're at a really fun point because we just finished creating our curriculum. So now the world
Mhm.
is our oyster, which is super exciting.
Yay!
It's always really fun too, starting these projects and then watching them evolve in front of your eyes. Sci-fi was originally just going to be the curriculum, and then I met with one of my mentors through Sigma Xi, who Dr. Vernon, who you know as well, and we started talking about different avenues we could take this through. So now we're starting a YouTube channel, and we just got a logo designed by by a young girl in STEM, which is really exciting.
Oh,
So right now we're doing the YouTube channel, then hopefully a series of webinars, and then this is looking at least a year into the future, but we would love to start going to schools directly and working with students to teach them scientific thinking.
awesome. I love that. And see, I think that it's a testament to you as a leader that you have the future planned out because I feel like that's one of the key things about being a leader that does not get recognized enough. The fact that you don't only just have to be adaptable in the moment, you also have to be able to think about what's next. Where
Mhm.
are we going with this? And what can I do now to help get us there? So like you're saying you want to try and get into in-person situations and explain. And so what you're doing now with reaching out to science fairs, you're also laying that foundation for, hey, I've got some connections here. So maybe one day, if I want to get into a school, I know the person who's in charge of this science fair who knows literally every school in the entire state. They can get me in
Yeah.
anywhere, which goes to networking, which is something that I love. Um, but I like that we're on that topic of conversation. So, what are your thoughts on that ability to like think ahead, and how do you think that relates to um, your confidence in yourself? Because it feels like there is definitely a connection between the two. What would you say um,
Mhm.
comes to mind when you think about a possible connection?
Absolutely. You learn how to think ahead by messing up and trying it again with a different approach and seeing if that works. I remember being really young in elementary school trying to start a project and trying to work on the end result before I had planned or written anything else out. And needless to
That's
say,
me.
that did not go well. So there's definitely experience that needs to teach you the cause and effect relationship of, especially within working with a team, everything you do is going to have some kind of repercussion, whether it be
Mhm.
good or bad, whether it drives you to or away from progress. And it's important to know how to handle the situations and be ready for the curveballs that whatever you're trying to do is going to throw at you.
I like that. Yeah, I think failing is such a great teacher. And
Hmm.
another thing that we don't really talk about a lot when it comes to leadership,
Yeah.
because I feel like we have this sort of um, vision that a leader is somebody who always knows exactly what to do in every situation. But I feel like it's kind of the opposite. They're the one who never knows what to do in the right situation, but they know how to take what they can from a situation and learn from it. Um,
Mhm.
what would you
I
say
really
on that?
I really love that, especially looking at this from a female perspective where we are more likely initially to not be taken seriously. We always feel like
Hmm.
we have to push that extra little bit to come across as super professional and super
Yeah.
on top of everything. We need to have our act together at all times. And with time, once I've established rapport with the group that I'm working with, I have outright told them, "Hey, I've never done this before. Let's figure it out together." And we've all
Hmm.
kind of gone through that learning experience as a whole, which ultimately not only helps with my leadership because I'm able to get their involvement, get their perspectives, but then it helps them grow too. So that when I leave the organization, if I end up if with something like high school where I graduate and move on, when it's their turn to become leaders, they know what they're talking about. And they have some kind of experience with handling those curveballs, handling those problems, and working through them.
That's awesome. I like that. Yeah. I a lot of my conversations in this series have ended up touching on this idea that being a leader is not and advocating for yourself and empowering yourself to blaze a trail. It does not just come with a self-centered focus. It's not just about bringing you to where you want to be, but it's also about bringing other people to where they need to be as well. And so I like that we're on that topic now here too. Um, and so, out of curiosity, and I know especially because both of us do a lot of work in empowerment, that's probably something that's on our minds a lot. What would you
Yes.
say is one thing that you've learned about how to empower others, or just in the realm of empowerment that you didn't expect?
Mhm. I think a lot of it is getting into their shoes, getting into their positions, and hearing their voices. I
Hmm.
have done a lot of work with cancer patients. I ran a charity back in Florida, where I'm from, to get them access to technology. And that entire time, due to HIPAA regulations, I never talked to the people I was helping. It was always send in the iPads, talk to the hospital staff, and then hear from the staff. I've gotten some thank you notes from the patients, which are really sweet, but I never directly got to engage with the patients and make sure that this is something that they needed. I would always hear that from the staff.
Hmm.
Now that I'm in college, I'm starting a new initiative related to hospitals. And the very first thing I did was, okay, I know I need to talk to these patients. I'm done trying to work for them, trying to guess what they need. So I got myself over to an infusion center at a local hospital and spent an afternoon talking to different patients, hearing their life stories, and getting an idea of what they like, what they don't like, what they would like to see, and what really isn't helpful. When engaging with patients, especially, you see these cards that people make them, and they'll say things like stay positive or keep fighting, even get better soon, which isn't necessarily the most helpful thing for a cancer patient to hear because
Yeah.
realistically speaking, they might not get better soon. And they're so used to
Hmm.
hearing, oh, stay strong, keep fighting, that it loses meaning to them. So getting to talk to those patients and hear those words come from their mouths of this is not helpful was incredibly eye-opening and super helpful for the initiative.
Wow, that's really interesting. Wow. Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's that's something that I believe too, especially when it comes to my area of passion, which is empowering women, particularly women in STEM, because it's the same kind of situation where we as a society assume we know this is what women need, or this is what we need to get more women into STEM. We need to teach them STEM. We need to teach girls STEM. We need to get girls excited about STEM. But through conversations with other women and through my own learning, I realized it's not just about getting girls excited about STEM and oh, math is cool kind of, but it's also about giving them that strength to keep pushing through STEM when it inevitably gets hard, whether because they're a woman or just because STEM is hard.
Mhm.
And so just from conversations with other women, that's how I've kind of come to that conclusion because it's it's not like there is research out there that's well, I mean there's starting new research out there about confidence, but at the time, there's not much that focuses on those other pieces. And so I think you have a great point about when you're trying to help people, go talk to the people you're trying to help instead of making assumptions yourself without ever actually putting
Mhm.
yourself in their shoes. So I really like that.
Absolutely. Thank you. We were talking about assuming what people need. It reminded me this one classic story with Sally Ride going up. I think it was Sally Ride. I could be thinking
Oh,
of the wrong person, but going up into space, and they
I've
offered
heard
her
this
a
story.
hundred tampons for 2 weeks or whatever it was when she had her period.
Uh-huh.
Definitely talk to the people you help.
That's a great story. I love that because it just shows how little knowledge there is about like women's health and like what it means to be a woman. Again, because we live in a society that's driven by people who are not women, or for the most part. And I do recognize that there is that element of identifying as a woman rather than being born with woman characteristics. Um, but I think when it comes to just empowering those who identify as women, there is that need to talk to them and hear what they need, um, rather than make assumptions based on the stigmas and the stereotypes and the warped information that has been fed to us, by a society that's not built to support us. Um,
Absolutely.
so going back to some of our questions here, um,
Mhm.
we've talked a bit about fear, we've talked a bit about adaptability and empowerment. Um, in terms of speaking up, I'm sure you've definitely had to verbally advocate for yourself quite a bit as both a young person
Mhm.
and as a um, somebody who's in this realm of advocacy. And so, has there ever been a time when you've wanted to speak up but felt like your voice would be ignored or disrespected? And so, what did you do in that situation?
It happens on a regular basis, and I've found ways to cope with it that ultimately get the job done, but not really in a good way. I see it a lot, especially when I haven't proven myself in an environment yet. Obviously, my field is largely male dominated, and I've even received comments on risks I'm taking as a girl. So, as a result, when I point out a mistake in someone's work or I try to advocate for myself, I catch myself creating blame in a situation that shouldn't have any and then putting it on myself. So this even shows up in the most rudimentary things of, hey, that email attachment might not have gone through on my end. Am I doing something wrong? Could you make sure it went through? Or the information you told me might be wrong. Am I misinterpreting it? Am I doing something wrong here? I'm always bringing it back to myself. And that could be a matter of politeness, but creating blame is something that really should not have to happen in the situations. And again, it's effective, it works, the email attachment gets sent, the information gets clarified, the typo is fixed, but at the cost of some of my professionalism maybe showing up, or at the cost of my coming across like I know what I'm talking about.
That is so interesting because you're so right. I've definitely been in similar situations where like I've been talking with somebody who's very much more experienced and
Mhm.
important in this world than I am. And so there is sort of that tendency to kind of diminish yourself because you don't want to come
Right.
across as arrogant or um like because like if you know somebody made a mistake, like if you know that they something that happens with me a lot is people spell my name wrong, um
Right.
either one. And so it's like
Yeah.
when they do say my spell my name wrong, it's kind of like, do I point that out and be like, hey, oh, by the way, my name's spelled with an ay, not just an, um
Mhm.
or do I just kind of be like, oh, hey, I don't know, maybe if I know autocorrect does this sometimes, but my name is actually
Mhm.
spelled this. And so having to kind of navigate that delicate balance of
Mhm.
um, you clearly like made a mistake, but also I'm trying to be polite and not make you feel like you did something wrong. Um,
Right.
that's definitely a hard space to be in. Um,
Mhm.
so do you have any, I know you kind of touched upon this a little bit, but do you have any particular strategies maybe that don't require us to diminish ourselves in that way?
That's an interesting question. I think I do it so much that it's just kind of second nature right away. I immediately flip over to, hey, I'm sorry, but I think I'm doing this thing wrong. Um,
Hmm.
Trying to think, and none really come to mind, honestly, which is actually it's something I need to work on now that I realize this. Trying to advocate in these smaller situations. I think on a bigger scale, it's important to show to people that you are where you are for a reason, if that makes any sense. So
Hmm.
proving myself is something that I end up that comes up a lot. And I know it shouldn't be there, but it is so much easier to come across in the sense that I know what I'm talking about once I've already done something with the organization or already worked in a certain environment. I
Yeah.
know that when I go somewhere new and there are a lot of new people who I don't really talk to, I get really quiet. And I've had people comment that I come across as really shy, even not even directly to my face. I've just heard that I come across as shy in these new environments, and I think that's not at all how I feel. Um,
Hmm.
so the act of pretending to be confident or pretending to be comfortable in a new situation takes a lot of practice, and it's something I'm still learning, but I think that it helps build your person as the person that you want to come across as. Just pretend you know what you're doing and the rest will follow.
Fake it till you make it, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think I've heard some people disparage that, but I like that quote because I think it's true in a sense that there is a point where you do have to um put yourself out there and just go for it, even if you don't feel prepared. Not
Mhm.
necessarily faking it, but rather just doing it until it
Yeah.
manifests into something real. Like, maybe if you don't
Mhm.
feel confident right now, if you portray that confidence, it's not that you're faking it, but necessarily as you're just manifesting it. Because if you practice that confidence enough, eventually you will probably start to internalize it. Um, Going back to your what you're saying about being shy, I was very similar. You can definitely not tell now, but when I was younger, I before I did, like 5 years of five more than 5 years in musical theater, I was so shy. Like I would not even talk to people, like let alone sing in front of people. That would I would go hide in a closet for a week. But if you even asked me to do that. And of course
Mhm.
now, I will gladly sing in front of people, even if I sound terrible. I don't know. It's just because I was put in enough situations where I had to start learning how to do that. Like when you're auditioning, you're not surrounded by a group of 5 other people who are singing with you. You're singing by yourself. You got to figure it out. And so
Yeah.
it's almost like embracing those situations where you're being forced to
Mhm.
portray this skill or this confidence that you don't feel like you yet have. um that's how you start to build it, because you can't start if you never you can't create something if you never start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. I've been in the realm of public speaking. Originally, I started presenting my research and talking about my science, and then it moved into speeches at science fairs, and now it's just full blown public speaking as its own thing.
Hmm.
And I go into what my mom called presentation mode when I was younger, where it's much easier to feign that confidence even in a room where you're the only girl there or you're the only young person there, and everyone
Hmm.
else, you know their eyes are on you, you know that they're judging you, and you just have to embrace that and go along with it.
Yeah, I was actually at a science fair yesterday, and um one of the guys and I was talking about how some of these kids, they really kind of do get in that presentation mode. I was talking with this one little girl, and I asked her about something, like what does she do else at school, and she kind of got this like presentation mode, and she was like, well, I do this and I do this, and it was
Oh.
clear like she was still kind of in that vibe of,
Mhm.
oh, I have to come across as confident. I know what I'm talking about. And so um it was just really cute and funny to see. But it's also really inspiring to see, how she has been able to build that confidence from having to portray it for and practice it so much. So
Mhm.
I like your point about, it sounds like it was the same for you, the same situation where at some point along that journey of faking it, it just became part of you.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and so, on that note, this is probably a good place to sort of wrap up our conversation. And so, just as kind of an end, uh, do you have any advice for women, and particularly young women, who are looking to become a trailblazer like you and tap into their passions and become somebody who is changing the world, but don't really know where to start? Do you have any advice?
Definitely. Don't, and we touched upon this a little bit sooner, but don't bar yourself to what you think is out there. If you have a passion or you have something that you think might be a passion, go explore it relentlessly, chase after it, and create those opportunities for yourself. Send that cold email, learn or fail a few times, and then learn from that. That's the only way that you're going to grow and the only way you're going to be able to do something that no one else has ever done. Believe in yourself and go for it.
I love that. Awesome. And that is a perfect place to conclude. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. This has been really fun. And yeah, I really appreciate your time.